So my name is Chandresh. A little bit of intro about me. I've been into IT and programming in general for about 16 years now. I started in 1999 as a web developer, and I've worked with many different languages and platforms, including ASP, PHP, Java, JSP, VB.NET, and before I started with Ruby on Rails. So about 5-6 years back, I started developing using Ruby on Rails professionally, or you can say full-time basis, right? And so today we are here to learn about Ruby on Rails framework. So I would be assuming like since this is a short session, right? So typically I typically get a bit of an intro about participants as to what the experience level is, or what you have done already. But for today's session, I would assume you know a little bit about web development already, and you have some some programming experience or knowledge. All right. So by the end of this today's session, you'll be able to you'll know what's Ruby on Rails, what are the main features of Ruby on Rails, what is MVC framework, and how to build a very simple Ruby on Rails web application. All right. Okay. So let's start with why we should learn Ruby or Ruby on Rails. And even before starting with that, let's decipher, or let's dissect the name Ruby on Rails. So Ruby on Rails means two things: Ruby, which is the programming language, and Rails, which is the web framework. So when we say Ruby on Rails, we talk about two different things, right? So when we say Ruby is a programming language developed by Yukihiro Masamoto, also known as Mats, who is a Japanese programmer, right? About 20 years back. It was a programming which was developed for making the programmers happy, right? So when Mats started doing programming, the programming languages of that time, C, C++, and similar languages, he kind of felt, okay, coding in general does not make the programmer happy. You look at your code and you say, oh, I'm missing something there, and when you read your own code, you don't feel good about, like, you say my own code is not readable, right? So you write some code today, and you see the code 1 month down the line, you say, oh, my own code is not readable. So Mats' mission was to create a language which is readable and in general which makes the programmers happy, right? So so 20 years down the line, now when we work on Ruby, it certainly is very easy to learn, right? And easy to write code in, and the code that we write comes up really nice looking, readable, and so so in a sense it saves your time, right? So if you can read the code well, right, you kind of it saves your time, right? And it allows you to develop code easily, right? It's free, of course. All the open source, most of the open source stuff is anyway free. It's open source, so it can be customized. It's portable, which means like it can be so you can develop using Ruby on, let's say, Mac, Windows, Linux, and even on some mobile platforms. And I guess the most important fact is that learning Ruby gets you a job easily, or you can say you can grow in your career. I will again come back to that point when I will speak about Rails. So just hold on that point. And you can make your own tiny little domain-specific languages, right? And the community, the main reason why Ruby is growing so much is the community. So whenever you have any questions, you search on Google, you get the answers immediately. Um, Plus, there are a lot of, the community creates lots of gems or plugins that you can use, easily. So that's how you get to do your project quickly, right? Okay. So as I was saying that about 20 years back, it was developed by Yukihiro Matsumoto, also known as MATS. Ruby is influenced by many, great languages or old languages like Perl, Smalltalk, FL, Ada, Lisp, and some other. Ruby is a object-oriented programming language. It is interpreted, so it's not compiled, right? Like it's not like Java or C++ where you first need to compile your code. It's basically an interpreted language, right? It draws a lot from the syntax from the Smalltalk, which is basically was the original object-oriented programming language. Perl, which is basically a scripting language, and Lisp, which is a functional language. So Ruby has all the features of an object-oriented language, a functional language, and a scripting language, right? And during this class or this training session, as we go on, we'll see some of those features, right? So in Ruby, everything is an object. So when we say, an object-oriented language, right? So just like, for example, Java. Yeah. Java is an object-oriented language, but even in Java, there are primitive objects. There are things which are not objects, right? For example, you can have int, you can have char in Java, but in Ruby, literally everything is an object. So anything, any number, true, false, nil, right? There's nothing which is there's no value in Ruby which is not an object. So every value that you will see in Ruby is an object. Okay. The syntax of Ruby is very English-like, which makes it more readable, as you will see. And the syntax is terse or compact, so which makes you write less code. So in my own personal experience, having used multiple languages ranging from ASP to Java, JSP, and PHP, writing typically in if you're writing some code in Ruby and for a similar program that you've written in Java or some other language, it will typically be 1/3. So a program written in Java, if you write in Ruby, it will be 1/3 of the number of lines. So less number of lines means less bugs probably, right? Or maybe less coding anyway, right? So it saves you time and bugs, right? Okay, now coming to Ruby on Rails. So far we have been looking at Ruby, which is a programming language or a scripting language. So Ruby on Rails is the framework or the web framework which is used to develop websites or web applications, right? It uses a framework, a pattern which is called MVC or Model View Controller, right? It's an open source framework. Again, just like Ruby, it's also an open source framework and it's freely available to use. Ruby on Rails is popular for its simplicity in terms of use, right? Productivity. It's a rapid development framework. You can do things very fast, as you will see shortly, as I will show you a short demo of developing a very simple thing, right? Right from the configuration part, like for example, when I used to do development in Java or PHP early on, you have to set up a lot of things, like you'll be setting up LAMP, right? Or Tomcat. You'll be configuring a lot of stuff, and that used to take close to a day for setting things up, and sometimes more than that, right? In the early days of development, right? But with Rails, as you'll see, things are very simple because all the things are packaged with the Rails thing. So when we create a new Rails application, all the things will be there with you, the server, the database, the configuration. So you don't need to do anything if you want to use the default settings. All right. So speed of development is certainly one of the key areas with Rails, and the development that you do, that we will be doing using Rails, it's very reliable, right? The Rails include a lot of state-of-art features, related to security, for example, related to caching, right? And other things that we'll be seeing later on the sessions, and which makes your coding really easy. So your job becomes easy. You don't have to worry about security. You don't have to worry about caching stuff, right? You don't have to worry about a lot of stuff which normal web developers in other languages have to think about. So all those decisions are taken for us by Rails. So it's an opinionated piece of software, but it's very popular and it's very much in demand. So coming back to the point of jobs. So right now, so the job market with Rails, with respect to Rails, is very high, right? The demand is too much and the availability of resources is less, and that is one of the reasons that it is one of the highly sought after skill in the market, right? So it is the demand of Rails at the moment is more than Java in a sense, right? Because the number of resources are less. So learning both Ruby and Rails will take you to a path where you can get a job easily. All right. Okay, so reason behind the name, as we discussed earlier, Ruby is the programming language and Rails is the framework. So combining both the things is you get Ruby on Rails, right? Okay, so we will be using Ruby 2.1.x version in this course, right? So current version is Ruby 2.2. There is not much change between these two versions. So if you're using any of the version, like either 2.1 or 2.2, that should work. All right, we have already seen some of the advantages, so I'll just move on. Okay, so what are the, like whenever you think about, switching the application or framework or, programming language, or whenever you're starting your career with a new language, you always ask, okay, who else are using them? So Ruby on Rails is used by GitHub, which is, the biggest code repository at the moment, online repository. Some other, applications that are written in Ruby on Rails is Twitter, Yellow Pages. Shopify is a, kind of a solution using which you can create your own shopping cart. There is SlideShare, then there is Groupon, right? There are lots of them. In fact, right now in the market, most of the startups prefer to use Ruby on Rails, right? Since it's a rapid development framework, you get to develop things very quickly. So for example, the earliest versions of Twitter were developed within weeks, right? They were able to change things very quickly, and they were able to come to the market quickly, right? You can get to your end user quickly, and that really helps a startup. But not just startups, even big companies are using Ruby on Rails. I've been associated with some of the companies like Deloitte, R Systems, Nokia, even Adobe. They all are using Ruby on Rails in certain capacity. All right. Moving forward, so basic feature or basic premise of Ruby on Rails is convention over configuration. So when we used to develop in Java or earlier languages, we used to have to do a lot of configuration. Okay, what is the name of the database, which folder the cache will be, which folder the database will be, or if you are using file-based database, which where our model will be, where our view will be. So you have to set all those things. But in Rails, you don't have to. You just say, okay, just say this is my application name and everything else is taken care of for you. But if you want to change some of those things, you can, of course, but you don't have to, right? So that's the basic principle or basic golden rule you can say of Rails, which is making it so popular. Another, guiding principle is dry. Don't repeat yourself. So every piece of information should be on at a single place, right? So if it is a business rule, it should be in a model, right? So when you are developing an application using Ruby on Rails, always keep this principle in mind, that you keep one single information at a single place. You don't replicate that information multiple places, or else you will have you'll be breaking this principle actually, and that will create headaches for you later in the project. All right. So any questions till this point before I start with a demo where I will be creating a small application? Okay, Kuldeep, you are saying convention over. Okay, so you're saying COC once again. Okay, so convention over configuration is a basic guiding principle of Ruby on Rails. So when like if you have developed in any other web framework or language before, you typically have to configure certain set of things. You have to say, for example, what is the name of the database? That's a basic thing. You'll say to tell, okay, where my models will be, where my views will be. You have to set all those names, and it goes on till very basic things like, okay, if my controller name is, let's say, welcome, what would be the name of my view folder? Okay, so even minute things like these you have to configure or tell in some ways in other frameworks, whereas in Rails all these things are taken care of. So there are sensible defaults, so you don't have to tell what's the name of the model directory. You don't have to say what is the name of the database. All that is taken care of for you, right? So as you will see, so again we'll see this in a moment, that when we'll create a new Rails application, you don't have to specify anything other than the name of the application. Once you give it the name of the application, all other settings or all the other configuration will be based on some sensible defaults. As your experience with Rails grows, like let's say you have got 3-4 months, 5 months of experience working with Rails, you slowly learn how to change some of those defaults, right? You don't have to, but sometimes you might have to change, let's say, name of the database. Okay, that's easy, it's not difficult, but you don't have to do it at the start of the things, right? Any other questions? Is this clear, Kuldeep? So I'll coming back to all this stuff in a moment. Let's say let's see how to how to create an application in Rails. Again, so typically in a bigger session, in a full session, I would be first making sure that you all installed Ruby on Rails and you have got all the editors that we need. But for this session, I'll just go on and assuming that we'll be doing that later stuff, right? So I'll just start with the first step, or say once you have installed everything, you'll be starting how do I create a new Rails application, right? So that's easy actually. So I'll go to my terminal window, right? Command prompt, and I'll say Rails new and the name of the application. So whatever is the name of application, and let's say I want to create a shopping cart, I'll say okay, Rails new shop or something like that. For now, let's say Rails new app, right? Or let's call it shop. I'm just providing the name of the application, nothing else. Okay, just press enter and it will develop or create all the different structure or folders for me, right? As you see, a lot of them, and we'll be looking at some of them today, right? Of course, the full session we'll be looking at everything. All right. Once the process is done, we go and we say cd to the name of our folder. Okay. So again, just to recap. So step 1, Rails. Step 1, Rails new. Okay. So this is Rails is the command. New is means like new application, and the shop or whatever. It could be shop, it could be app, it could be web, it could be website, it could be Twitter, whatever you want to develop, right? It's the name of the application that you're doing. And then we'll say change directory to change directory to that folder, right? So I'm using Mac basically, but most of these steps will work exactly similar in Windows and Linux, right? Now here I'll just start the server. I'll say Rails server, which will start the Fabric server, which is the default server that comes with Ruby on Rails automatically. All right, and looking at the message correctly, it says okay, that the development, you can start the development here. Okay, so I'll just copy it. Okay, so I just wrote down here Rails server, and the step 4 is open in a browser. That's it. And I see this welcome aboard message. So whenever we are developing in Rails, and if we see this message, that means the installation and everything has worked perfectly. Okay. All right. Moving forward, I'll open an editor where I can see all my files. So typically you can use any editor, but sorry. But an editor which comes with some sort of a sidebar or a drawer kind of thing where you can see all the folders and files on the left side or right side somewhere, it's helpful, right? I use RubyMine, but you can use any of the freely available editors like Sublime Text and others, which we'll be discussing later. Today, let's see how development is done. Right, I'll go to my folder and see my folder here, right? I'll just open it up. So any editor which comes with some this sort of a tree structure is going to be very helpful. All right, I will ignore all these things for now. Okay, so this is my application structure, right? All the different files that are created by that simple command. Okay, and again, so it has got an app folder which basically stores all the code that we are going to write, including JavaScript, all the assets, all the images, all the Rails code, all the model view controller or helpers that we are going to write. Everything is going to be stored inside this F folder. So this is the most important folder. Then there is a bin folder, which basically where you won't do anything. This basically stores all the binary, your binary commands like Rails, bundle, rake. We will be using these things, but we won't be, kind of making new ones here, at least not in the start, right? Then there is a config folder which stores all the configuration for you. So all the configuration is already done for you, but let's say you want to change something. So it's here inside this folder, config folder, right? Then we have got the DB folder, which stores our database. We are using SQLite 3, right? So it stores the file-based database here, and some other things that we'll look at shortly. Then we have got a lib folder, which is basically empty. It has got nothing actually, where you can keep your own code which is not Rails related, right? Which is library, so let's say you want, which is not related to your domain. You're doing some coding which is more general, generic. You can keep it here. Then we've got a log, which is a very important folder. Here you can see your development log. So whenever you want to debug something, you want to have a look at, okay, what happened with some of the things that I did, or what was the SQL that was generated or something like that. You can see, look at it here. Then we've got some other folders like public folder, where you can keep things like 404 pages or anything, any static thing that you want to display. Then we have got a test folder. So we'll not be talking much about tests today, but Ruby on Rails comes with a full-fledged test-driven development framework, right? This is called Minitest, and an alternative which is called RSpec, which can be used with Ruby on Rails right from the go, right from the start. So, but it's a it's kind of a it's kind of difficult for a beginner to learn two things at one time. So typical approach is to first learn Ruby and Rails, and then learn test-driven development. Okay, then we've got a TMP folder where some of the caches and PIDs are created, stuff like that, sessions, sockets. Again, we won't be using this much. There's a vendor folder where anything that you are using, like third-party stuff, you can keep it there. So, but for today, we'll be focusing on a subset of things. We can't be learning everything today in a 1 hour session, right? So we'll be looking at a subset of things. So the subset will mostly rely will be on this app folder and this config folder. So the first thing that we would like to configure is we want to show something better on this home page. So right now it just says welcome aboard, okay, which is some magically created page by Rails. We don't want this. We want to change this. Okay. So coming back to the MVC thing a bit. Okay, I'll just open a slide for it. Okay. Right. So Rails uses MVC framework, where you keep all the data or all the business logic on the model side of things, right? And all the display related thing, your templates, your HTML in the views, and the controller, is the basic, which maintains which view to show and where the data comes from. So it's kind of a controller. Okay, it's a controller which controls the views on one hand, and gets the data from the model whenever the view needs. All right, so this is how it looks like. So a request comes from the user. So user types something in the browser. Okay, so let's say www.websitename.com, let's say tutor.com, or like groupon.com or whatever. And that request initially comes to the web server, and web server passes it to the dispatcher, and through the dispatcher that request comes to the Rails router, which basically maps that request. So whatever request comes, the Rails router will map that request to a file which is called routes.rb, right? And that file contains all the routes, or you can say all the possible pages on the website in a layman term, right? So let's say, for example, so in our case, So if you look at our case, we are saying localhost 3000. So this initial thing like localhost 3000, you can replace it with like twitter.com or something like that. So that's the name of the website. And what we are actually requesting for is the root route or the root page or the home page, right? So somehow, somewhere we have to define that home page, what's going to be there. All right. So let's see. In our config folder, there's a file called routes.rb. And in this file, we define all the routes or all the paths or all the pages, you can say, in a layman term, that are going to be possible in our website. So if you look at this file, in detail, you'll see that there is already a root route defined, but it is commented. So all these hash things that you see here, they are comments. Right? So at the basic minimum, what we can do is we can just uncomment this thing. Okay. So I've uncommented this root route, and I will just go and see in my browser what happens. I'll just refresh, and it tells me, okay, I don't have a controller by the name welcome controller. Okay. Let's experiment a bit more. Let's say I want to change this to home. Okay. And now I refresh. Now it says, okay, initialize constant home controller. All right. So this tells me that I need to create a controller, right? With whatever the name that is here. Okay. So in my app folder, there's a controllers folder. I'll go and create a file, and here's the convention. So the convention is the name of the file will be name of the controller underscore controller .rb. So this is convention. If you follow the convention, everything will be fine. Okay. I'll go inside this file and I will create a Ruby class. Okay. I know I haven't taught you or told you how to create a Ruby class as of now, but it's very simple actually. So that the way to create a class is say class, and the name of the class, which is home controller, in all cap, like in camel case, just like in Java, and it extends. So all the controllers that we are going to create, they're going to extend, or they are going to subclass the application controller. So we'll say application controller, and we have an and at the end. So if you compare this with Java thing, so in Java you'll say class home controller, something like this, and you'll have a brace. Yeah, but so this is how it will look like in Java, some sort. But in Ruby, we are going to use class keyword, and to end the thing, we'll say end. All right. Now we have created a controller. We created a home controller. I'll just go and refresh my page again. Now it says action index could not be found. Okay, let's again compare this thing with my routes file. So my routes file says home index. So home was the controller. So that means index would be the action, right? It says action index. So in Rails, any method that we create, any public method that we create in the controller is known as an action. So the way to create a method in Ruby is, we'll say def and the name of the method, and that's it. We're done. So we have created a method or an action in our controller. Again, I will refresh, and now it says template is missing. So template is our view. Okay, and it is looking for something called as home slash index, which means it is looking for a folder named home, and inside that a template named index, right? So what we'll do is we'll go into our views, we'll say new directory home, right? And inside that home folder we'll have a template, okay? And the name of the template will be index, okay, dot html dot erb. So all the view templates in Rails have an extension dot html dot erb, okay, and say okay, and now I will refresh and we get a blank screen. Nothing to worry. In fact, if I write something here, anything, and refresh, it will reflect it. Now we can create a simple application which basically is able to reflect whatever HTML we are putting in here. Okay, I'll just say, let's say h1. Okay, this is home page, right? So refresh home page. All right. So this is a basic, very bare minimum web application where you can at least display the HTML. But not just that, we can also put some Ruby inside here. So ERB, when we say ERB, it's an embedded Ruby. So it allows both HTML and Ruby. It's similar to JSP or PHP in a sense. Okay. So let's say, for example, let's say I want to display something repeatedly, and here I will see how elegant Ruby is, right? Say 10 dot times 2 okay, and I want to, let's say, print something in bold. Let's say hello. Let's say I would like to put a break also here. So again, the language or the syntax is very much English like, so anyone can understand, okay, this is going to do this thing 10 times, right? So any questions you have for me, let me know. So again, I'll just note on the steps for you that whatever we did, just to recap. So edit config / routes.rb file to uncomment the root route, and then create home controller. I'll just say home controller, and we created a action. So create action index, then we did create folder home, or I would say app. Again, inside app views home, we'll have index.html.erb, okay, and then add whatever you want, like, so add content to the page. So this is what we did so far. right? So we created a new Rails application from scratch. We started the server. Okay. So as you've noticed, we changed things, right? But we never need to restart the server. Okay. That's one of the basic features of Rails development, where you don't have to change, or don't have to restart the server for basic changes that you're doing. Okay. So again, any questions? If you have any questions, any sort of question. So this is so let's go back to the slides a bit. So this is what we have looked at, the flow. Mostly this side of things, we haven't looked at the model, right? Okay. So user makes a request, controller, the request is forwarded to the controller, and controller decides what view to display. Okay. Again, the slides, you have the same steps that we have gone through mostly, right? And a description of some of the folders that we've looked at. And how to run the server. So this is another way of creating the controller. So we did it by hand, right? So we created the file and then put the code there, but you can also do it using a helper or a command line functionality provided by Rails, where you just say Rails generate controller home, and it will create a controller, home controller, empty home controller for you. Or you can say, okay, Rails generate controller home index, and it will create the home controller, the index.html.erb file, right? And the home folder, everything that we did manually. All right. So let me know if you have any questions. So this is the demo part, I guess, and so that's it from my end in terms of the content of the today's training. But so if you have any questions, let me know now. Okay, I think, okay, I got some questions from, okay, on which web server Ruby apps run. So again, when we are talking about Ruby on Rails, so Ruby is the programming language, which is a scripting language just like Perl, right? And you won't be developing a web application solely on Ruby, right? So Rails is a framework, and there are other frameworks also, like Sinatra is a web framework, which is again based on Ruby. Then there is also Pedrino. So we will be using some sort of a web framework in Ruby to develop an application. Ruby on Rails, which is the topic for today, comes with a web server which is called Fabric for development. So in your development environment, you are mostly going to use Fabric, right? There's also another server, alternative server that some people use, which is called Thin. Okay. And on a production server, on the other hand, typical combination which is used is either Apache plus Passenger or Nginx plus Unicorn. So people usually use Nginx plus Unicorn. That is the most popular combination of web server plus app server nowadays in Ruby world. Some people also use Apache and Passenger. Santosh Babu, I didn't get your question. So if you can say, tell me what you want to ask clearly. So Ashwani, let me know if that answers your question. Ashwani? Anyone having any other questions? Do let me know. Anything related to Ruby on Rails? Why should we learn it? People usually ask me like, what's the job market like, and will I get a job, or will there is there a career option in this, right? And some people have questions like web servers and how to do something in Ruby on Rails. So if you have any such questions, please do let me know. Okay, again, I guess this window is a bit okay, yeah, bit tricky. Okay, can Ruby be programmed in Windows OS also? Yes, a lot of people, in fact, a lot of trainings that I do, uh, especially the corporate trainings in India, uh, those companies use Windows primarily, and so a lot of development in Ruby on Rails is done on Windows. Okay, and again, like I guess we'll be sharing you with you, or the installation steps, or it's very easy. In fact, installing Ruby on Rails on Windows is very easy. You can just go online and say Ruby on Rails installer.com. You can just search Rails installer on Google, and you'll get a exe file. You install it, and you're done. Installing it on Mac on Linux is a bit more involved than that. All right, Abhijit. Okay, so that was the Abhijit's question. Okay, Piyush says, is there an all-encompassing package? Okay, that's what I said. So you can download and install Rails installer, and you'll be done in five minutes. So the only problem with Rails installer is that I've seen is it's typically a little behind the latest version. Okay, so sometimes you will feel that okay, I'm developing on a little older version when you're using Rails installer, right? So the other way is, if you want to have the latest versions of Rails and Ruby, you typically will have to install Ruby using Ruby installer, and then Rails using very easy step, which is like gem install Rails, which again we'll be taking up in the future sessions, right? Okay, again, so I see most of the questions are related to installation, right? So it says, Kuldeep is saying we have to install Ruby and Rails separately and install. So, okay. So just to give you a quick idea, just a quick step. You can go to, there's a Rails installer. Just want to do it quickly. You can just search the Rails installer, and there is railsinstaller.org. You can download a complete package. So they have Windows. So as you can see, they have got Ruby 2.1.5 and Rails 4.1. So for our session, it works perfectly. Okay, but typically, since the latest version of Ruby is like 2.2.2 at the moment, and Rails is 4.2, you typically would like to have more control on that. Okay, so if you want, you can install Ruby separately and then Rails separately. That will give you more flexibility. Again, we'll see those steps later on, like in the full session. Can we use external databases like MySQL, Oracle? That is asked by Dinesh. Yes. In fact, using MySQL is just like, I'll just give you a quick hint. So last time when we created the application, we said Rails new shop. If you want to create a new application using MySQL, for example, they will say Rails new, let's say app -d, D for database, MySQL, or PostgreSQL, or all the supported ones. So if you're on Windows, You can also say MS SQL, right? Again, if you want, you can just say Rails, and it will give you all the options that are possible. So the options that are possible is MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, SQLite 3, Frontbase, IBM DB, SQL Server, JDBC MySQL, JDBC SQLite 3, JDBC PostgreSQL, and JDBC. So you can use any of these drivers. Okay. Dheeraj is asking, does ROR support cross-platform app building like Angular? Again, like Angular is something different. You know, Angular is more of a front-end technology. Okay. And Ruby on Rails is a server-side technology. I'm working on a project currently, which is a financial application, which uses both Angular for front-end and Rails for the back-end. Okay. As far as supporting cross-platform, so again, let's say the point is Rails is a server-side thing, which generates HTML, right? All the web-related or all the server-side technologies, including PHP, JSP, they basically generate HTML, which the browser can understand. Okay, so it's as cross-platform as any other web framework. But if you are talking about cross-platform in terms of what all servers are supported, so it is supported on all servers, Windows, Linux, Mac, or any servers that are there that are popular. Yes. So Abhijit, this course will teach you about Ruby and Rails both. So we'll be touching about all the stuff that is necessary to learn Rails. So all the Ruby syntax, the operators, how do you write different kinds of loops and other control structures, right? Blocks, procs, etc. Whatever is necessary to learn Rails, and also the Rails stuff. We will also be touching about what is an object, what is a class, how do we create objects, how do we subclass things, and all that stuff. Okay, Dinesh is asking again. I guess I already answered this question. That how can we use external databases? Okay. How much time it will take to become an expert in Ruby? That's Alok is asking that. So at a minimum, if you dedicate your full time, let's say 4 to 5 hours every day, you can start developing an application in 2 to 3 months, right? If you don't know any other language, right? Assuming that you don't know much about web development. But on the other hand, if you are already an experienced developer, you can become productive in less than 1 month also. Okay, and as far as becoming an expert, to become expert in any language, it takes years, right? Especially if it is if your first language. So to master your first programming language, it typically takes 4 to 5 years. But you don't have to be an expert to get a job. That's the best thing, right? So the day you start developing a web page, right? A database backed thing, a kind of admin panel that we will all go through in the course, right? So once you can show that to a employer that okay, see, this is what I can create, right? This is a job site that I've created, or this is a shopping cart that I've created. As soon as you are able to show that to an employer, you can get a job. And now on the job, you can get more and more exposure, and you can become an expert. So becoming an expert, it's a long-term journey. It takes years, not weeks or not months. So Ruby on Rails is not related to Android or iOS app development, directly, but most of the many of the Android and iOS apps are database based, or they They basically display, different data elements from, let's say you have an app for yellow pages. So it will be displaying data actually, right? Which is already in the database. Rails comes as very handy for those projects because the API or the web service part is written in Rails, which is very quick. You can very quickly write a web service or API in Rails, and then you can use that API or web service from your Android or iOS app. So answer to your question is, it's not directly related to Android or iOS app development, but if your application requires data which comes through a web service or API, then yes, you can develop that portion, that web service or API portion using Rails. So if you're talking about hybrid application or sort of that, so there are Ruby-based frameworks, right, which allow you to develop Android or iOS app. This course does not, cover all that stuff. Right? This is more of a web development application course, but the Ruby that you learn in this course will certainly help you in learning any of those frameworks, which allow you to develop a iOS or iPhone application, iOS or Android application using a hybrid framework. So Abhijit is asking me can you tell me about the job chances in ROR compared to Java? So like I've been in industry for 16 years. I've worked in Java, PHP, and other technologies before moving to Ruby on Rails, and I can tell you straight away that anyone who's got ROR written on his resume will get a call immediately, right? It's been an experience. So you just write ROR in your resume and you'll get a call from some employer, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, just by writing ROR or Ruby on Rails on your resume, you'll get a call immediately from the employer. So on the other hand, like on the talking from the employer point of view, so I do a lot of recruitment also, and when I search for a Java resume on a portal like Monster or Naukri or something like that, I get thousands of resumes, like, right? If I post a job for Java developer, I'll get thousands of resumes, right? If I post a job for ROR, I'll get 10, 15 resumes. So the demand and supply, of course, the demand for Java is a lot more than Ruby on Rails. There is no doubt. Java is an old technology. Like, a lot of enterprise development happens in Java. But having said that, the supply of Java developers is more than the demand of Java developers. Whereas in the case of Ruby on Rails, the demand is much more, in fact, than the possible candidates that are available in the market. So you see very high salaries, you see a lot of demand. Once you have covered your first 6 months, there will be a lot of job offers, nice offers coming your way. Of course, you have to keep focusing on your career and keep developing. If you are a good developer, above average, you can work on problems, you can have certain communication skills, you will have no problems at all in finding a job and in finding a good job. I've seen people who work in Java and remain a entry level or a you can say beginner level programmer for for much more longer, like 4 or 5 years. Whereas in Ruby on Rails, you move fast. You say 6 months is like 2 years in Java in terms of salary also. Similarly, once you are 2 years old in experience, you're just like a 5-year-old Java developer, because you have to understand Rails started or become popular in 2007 around. So it's only been 8 years. So you can't find someone with 12 years of experience in Ruby on Rails. Right? That's not possible. So what is possible? So if there is a job for an experienced Ruby on Rails developer, it would be for 5 years, 5-year-old Ruby on Rails developer, right? So whereas in Java, you'll get guys who are having 15 years of experience. So that's the comparative market. Okay, Rahul. Again, lot of people again asking that Android application development. So I guess I've answered that question. How Ruby is best web app development tool than Java? See, when it comes to comparing two languages, so I won't say what is better or best. It's all relative terms. If you already know Java for many years, probably Java would be better for you, right? Isn't it? You know Java very well. But having said that, Ruby, the code written in Ruby is much more readable, right? Much more maintainable. That's one thing. You don't have to do any configuration stuff that you need to do in Java, right? And again, if you include both these things together, your development cycle becomes shorter. You are able to deploy very quickly to the production, and all that makes you a happy programmer, and makes your client a happy client, or your boss a happy boss, right? So that's how it helps you in developing. So Alok, if you're an experienced developer, so you certainly will learn Ruby on Rails quickly than other people who don't have any experience, right? Yes, Dinesh, there are a lot of fresher jobs available. So there are a lot of startups which take up Ruby on Rails, and you can pretty much land on any of those jobs. Again, the key is to put your 2 months time, let's say, on learning Ruby on Rails, and then get into the job market. You'll get a job. So any other questions? I guess that was the last question by Dinesh. If you feel that you need to know more than what I've told you, just let me know. So if you have no other questions, we can wrap up the session, right? Anything else, guys? Let me know. Okay. When will be the full session of ROR? If you know, I guess you can get in touch with Edureka, instructor like administrators. I guess you must be in touch with someone from Edureka, and they'll be telling you about the schedule and everything. So if you've already registered for the course, you might have already received the email with all the schedule and everything, right? If not, so I can probably request people at Edureka to mail you with everything. So I guess that's the question by Kuldeep. All right. So I think that's all for today, right? And if you have any questions before we part, just let me know. All right. So it was nice meeting you all, right? And I hope you enjoyed today's session. And I hope that I was able to increase your curiosity about this framework called Ruby on Rails. And if you do join the full session, we will go through the complete full Ruby on Rails stuff, and we'll be developing full stack applications on that, right? So I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.